Okay, Hare Krishna, dear ladies. Welcome to the February Urban Devi Sangha and Women's Discussion Group. A special welcome to those joining us for the first time. If you are joining us for the first time, please write it in the chat so that we can all say hello. We're very friendly, I promise. And my name is Damodar Priya Devi Dasi, and I co-host this monthly gathering with our dear Rukmini Walker and Surabhi Govinda Devi Dasi. So let me introduce our guest speaker for today. And our guest speaker for today is Dr. Suni Jani. And Dr. Suni Jani is going to be speaking, as you can see in our beautiful presentation picture that she has up, on spirituality and the brain. And in this talk on neurotheology, we're going to be delving into the fascinating intersection between brain science and spiritual or religious experiences. We'll understand how specific areas of the brain and even certain brain chemicals play a role in experiencing spirituality. And this is illustrated by insights from brain imaging. Also, we're going to be doing a small group activity, obviously doing breakout groups, where we'll learn how to observe and understand the impact of our own spiritual practices on our mental state. This is going to be a great interactive session that's going to provide us with practical applications of the concepts discussed. And it's really going to enhance how our spirituality intertwines with brain function. Okay, so let's geek out on this. But before we do that, let me just tell you a little bit more about Dr. Suni Jani. So Dr. Suni Jani is a child, adolescent, adult, and addiction psychiatrist who has a medical degree and a master's degree in public health with a focus on global health issues. And Dr. Jani has also completed her advanced training in psychiatry at the Baylor College of Medicine. And wow, she's been busy at the Harvard Medical School's Massachusetts General Hospital, where she's done her training. She's also published numerous articles and authored a book on various topics in mental health, as well as winning awards for her work in developing policies for refugee rights. And currently, Dr. Jani serves as the assistant and medical director at the Community Behavioral Health, and she sees patients of all ages, backgrounds, and conditions. And she also teaches at the University of Maryland and George Washington University. She has a keen interest in how spirituality can complement scientific approaches in mental health, and she believes in understanding a person's spiritual beliefs can play an important role in their overall well-being. So wow, if you don't feel smart after all that, everyone, I don't know, but I do. So welcome, Dr. Suni Jani. We're so excited to have you. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you for such a warm welcome. I'm a little embarrassed right now. I guess. But thank you. Yeah, so this is a topic very near and dear to my heart. The brain and spirituality, and it's basically about neurotheology, which I'll get into. I did want to start by just kind of going into my personal history with neurotheology and why I find it so important. So as mentioned, I'm a psychiatrist. I was raised by two psychiatrists, and both of them were incredibly pious, spiritual people who also firmly believed in science. So my entire upbringing, my entire personal worldview, professional worldview is that science and religion enhance each other. One isn't there to take out the other. They're there to make people feel like they can navigate and have more of a firm standing in life. So it is something that I was really drawn to in my training. I also like to explain a little bit about what a psychiatrist is, because I know there's people of all kinds of backgrounds who know all kinds of different things about psychiatry, but we're in the US, we're trained as medical doctors first, and then we go into training to learn therapy along with information about medication. And so you're required to be proficient in both therapy and medication, along with understanding many social, spiritual, cultural issues that go into defining who we are as people. And that's like the dream way. Whether it's executed, that's a whole separate discussion, but that is officially what the training involves in psychiatry. And so I was really, really grateful especially at the Baylor College of Medicine, to introduce me to an organization called the Institute for Spirituality and Health, where they made it a point to actually make physicians more comfortable with looking into what an incredible role spirituality has and spiritual science has in not just mental health, but physical health too. But I'm covering the mental health part since that's my expertise. I'm not going outside of my lines here. So I just wanted to preface with that so people can kind of understand what we're getting into with this. There are some scientific terms. I am going to do my absolute best to say everything in a easy to understand, easy to apply manner, but I am very open to feedback. So if someone goes, that was absolute gibberish, please say it was gibberish. I need to know so I can try to make sense of what I've explained here. Okay, so I think that's enough of my sort of like that's my disclaimer. So let me just explain what neurotheology is first and foremost. It's not like a degree you'll find when you look for a bachelor's or master's. It's usually a lot of people look into this at a PhD level, and where they like vehemently study neuroscience or theology. Some psychology degrees look into it. But basically, it wants to understand how our brains work. So, and just to figure out not just why we believe in things beyond what we can see, but how we do it and how it benefits us more than anything, not to disprove anything greater. And this explores, how our brain might influence our beliefs and experiences related to religion or spirituality and vice versa. And so a lot of different disciplines come together in order for neurotheology to be a thing. You can't just have a physician's perspective. You can't just have a psychologist's perspective. And even not even just theologians. You actually need practicing people who say, this is my personal spiritual experience, and this is what it means to me. And that really enhances what the findings are and what we've learned so far. So really, I think forever, and to be honest with you, sometimes I've thought of, because religion ultimately has come first, I think of religion as the original science. I think it really tries to explain so much of the natural world to us. And then as soon as the world moved as it did, and we decided science is its own thing, religion is its own thing, people have really tried to understand that link between science and religion. And people just want to know, how is my brain giving me this information about a higher power? How is my brain presenting this to me? Why does a higher power make me feel this way? Why do I feel this yearning? Why do I feel a longing? Why do I feel a great peace beyond just being calm for once? Things like that. And it's been around forever when you think about it, when you think about the fact that many of us of different spiritual paths have sometimes used spirituality to try to understand more about ourselves. This is just a little bit of a shift from that, because in the 20th century, when brain imaging really got big, people actually started imaging people in spiritual experiences, and that has blown up the field of neurotheology. Like, the findings have been incredible, and it really gives a lot of direction to spiritual individuals and what it is that they're doing to benefit themselves and others with their practices and their beliefs. So these are images called SPECT scans. So I'm not going to go into the whole detail of it, but what I'll say is that they look like this. There's lots of different types of medical imaging. This particular one looks at where your brain is the most active. So the more red an area is, the more activity is going on. And so when you see a lot of red, and usually they're looking at people with this kind of imaging in the midst of meditation, in the midst of chanting, maybe definitely not during yoga, but right after yoga. And they're looking at people even just feeling connected or feeling some great desire. There's a lot of interesting activity that happens in the brain, and that's really what I'm going to be going into with this. So where is our brain working when we connect with our spiritual selves? That is like, it's been $1 million question. There isn't one answer. And there may never really be a true answer, right? As many of us have a spiritual belief and spiritual experiences beyond our material bodies. It's easier said than done, but there's some little hints of how a higher spiritual life is impacting our brains positively. And so I would really, this is the bit I'm really excited about. So this is where, if I use jargon, somebody like unmute themselves and say, stop it. So this is where I get very nerded out, very excited. So let's start with the frontal lobe. It's right here. This is where you can point at it. Obviously, none of us should be touching it. Otherwise, you should be in a hospital. But this part is, it does a lot. But when most people are talking about their frontal lobe, they're talking about, how are you making decisions? How are you reasoning through stuff? Where's your self-control coming from, if you have any? Can you plan things in advance? Are you able to solve basic problems or even complex problems by being able to think through X leads to Y, leads to Z? The basic motivation we have to do things is sort of based in the frontal lobe. Our ability to have judgment, to make wise and poor decisions comes from our frontal lobe. Impulse control, which some of us have, some of us don't have, at least professionally, I can comment on that one. Our basic social behavior that allows us to be in a society is in the frontal lobe. The sense of who we are as a person, personality, but personality is interesting because a lot of us think that's a very fixed part of our identity, but it's not. Personality is actually something that shifts our entire lives. Even though we kind of might think of ourselves as one way, it's always in motion because our brains are always in motion in many ways. Learning is definitely frontal lobe. Having a sense of reward, like really appreciating what that reward gives us, and then just basic attention. So actually, a lot of people with ADHD, they have a smaller frontal lobe compared to people who don't have ADHD. And sometimes, you know what, that frontal lobe grows in. It's the part that when people go, why are teenagers the way they are? This is the part that's smaller, and then the other parts of the brain that maybe are responsible for more intense emotions is much more active. So the frontal lobe is doing a lot for us. So what they did is this is that SPECT scan I was talking about here with that attention area. And the image on the left is, if I really would pay attention right here, this is where the frontal lobe is. So look at the little bursts of red. It's like somebody's kind of paying attention. So what they found is that in meditation, there is a ton more activity. I mean, this whole area is bright red. This frontal lobe is going for it compared to when we're just kind of living our lives, hoping we don't walk into a light pole. So when there's a sense of meditation, it's even though you feel like I'm emptying my mind, everything's cleared out, there's a deep attention that happens in a spiritual experience. You're paying attention to something beyond what's material and what's in front of us. So, I do want some people to think about what that means. What does attention really mean, and why, when we're meditating, would it go to this very, very important, almost this material interactive part of our brain on a day-to-day basis? So one thing to think about. I'm going to move on to some other lobes now. So this is parietal, right about here. And this is involved in our sense of self and spatial awareness. This one I'm obsessed with. This is thought to be the home for spiritual experiences. This is universally, doesn't matter your religion, doesn't matter. This is sort of the area that a lot of neurotheology research starts falling into. And, it's like, pay attention to the line about spatial awareness, sense of space, sense of grounding. Other things here that's right there on the slide, but it's, touch, pain, temperature, pressure, vibration. All of those things let us know I'm sitting here right now. I'm sitting in front of a computer. This room's a little muggy. Maybe I'm feeling the floor against my feet. Some of the things we talk about in mindfulness and grounding techniques. And then what you're able to do is sort of analyze and recognize. So when your eyes are closed, you should be able to touch whatever surface you're sitting on, going, right, this is that chair I like. Oh, right, I'm good. This is where I am. And then also just kind of having a sense of proprioception just means the positioning. So having a sense of your positioning, with spatial awareness, body awareness, what's keeping us sitting, what's keeping us upright, what keeps us going. So here's what's interesting to me is that this is supposed to be an area that I thought, before I learned about this, I thought, oh, this should definitely keep going. This should get more active. Like, you're more in touch with the world when you're having a spiritual moment. So what it does is this area is cooling down. There is less activity. If I was to give you a SPECT scan, like the scan showing the activity of a brain, it actually would cool down quite a bit. So then what happens is you lose track of where your body ends and where the world begins. So some people have had spiritual experiences will go, I just felt so unified. I felt, for some people in the Hare Krishna tradition, I just felt so connected with Krishna in that moment. I hear that so much from devotees who are way, way better at this than I am. And they are amazing. It's actually the parietal lobe slowing down. It does not mean that the brain is doing something to create a sense of whatever higher power you're trying to connect with. This means that as you're seeking out that higher power, the brain is doing its most to give you a sense of unity with it. And so that's what I thought was so beautiful about this lobe. I will say things like I find this gorgeous part of the brain. It's just how I think. So next is the anterior cingulate cortex. This is kind of both in the frontal and parietal, if you kind of see based off the location, but this one's big. I mean, this one is implicated in obsessive compulsive disorder. So some people who have really bad obsessive compulsive disorder, a surgeon actually has to take this lobe out. But what we learn about with this when it comes to just having a spiritual experience, because it's mostly trying to correct errors. It's managing errors. It's managing things are out of place. Something's not right. I'm feeling fear. I'm feeling emotionally, you're constantly judging, going, what about that person's face? Friend or enemy? Friend or enemy? Is that right? Is that person mad at me? And this is your anterior cingulate cortex just going at it, trying to tell you, like, I don't know if we're in trouble right now. I don't know what that face means. I don't know why that text says, can we talk? Oh no, I don't like any of this. So in spiritual moments, which is, I think, the best phrasing for it, because I don't want to say prayer or chanting or meditation. It's such a unique experience to all people, but this thing quiets down too, thankfully. So then you actually get a sense of peace and harmony. You're not just sitting there appraising life second by second, wondering when the next bad thing is coming. When you're trying to reach a higher power, when you're trying to have a sense of peace, this will go, oh, okay, we're trying to be safe. We're trying to be okay. So this is a pretty interesting one. And just imagine what it's doing in OCD is it's going way the other way. So now there's the insular cortex. It's not like right there visibly on your brain. It's under some of these layers, and so that's why I have an image just kind of pointing at it. But this one they've studied extensively in loving kindness meditation, compassion meditation, and basically this area is responsible for empathy and compassion. I unfortunately have a very fuzzy image, and I'm so sorry because I really wanted to find a better one from the book I was reading, but they could not make that work. I apologize. But basically, red means focused attention, wherever you see a red blur. And then blue is open monitoring. Green is mantra recitation, and yellow is loving kindness and compassion meditation. And so this is kind of showing where some of the areas are more active and less active. But basically, when your attention improves, and your sense of monitoring the world isn't so much about terror anymore. You're having a monitoring that actually improves empathy and compassion through your spiritual practice, and your insula is reflecting that. So another fun one. Limbic system, this is, as a psychiatrist, we really consider this our organ system. You know, that this is the one that a lot of problems come from, but a lot of solutions can be found as well. So this is the emotion center of the brain. So in spiritual moments, it lights up. This one's going way the other way. It is super active because you have very, very strong emotions in prayer, meditation, some kirtan, definitely kirtan is where I feel like I see the most limbic system activation, moments of deep connection. And so the main organs that are a part of it, and there's not a pop quiz on this, that's not the group activity, but there's a thalamus, hypothalamus, amygdala, and hippocampus. So basically, we've got one that thalamus is just relaying all of the inputs from our body. So everything coming up, pain, pressure, fear, needing to run for it, whatever it is, your thalamus is taking it all in at once, which is an overwhelming job. And then it has to send it to the right part of the brain to go, hey, can you do something with this feeling? I can't tell if we should sit or run or if you have to do something. And then you have the hypothalamus that's like, everyone just calm down. Everybody just stop sending me so much. Everyone just, it's going to be fine. Amygdala is the one implicated in post-traumatic stress disorder and severe anxiety disorder. So this is what I was talking about with those teenagers. This thing is overactive in a teenager. And I'm not trying to like rip on teenagers. We were all teenagers once. Some of us might still be teenagers. But this one is way more powerful than the frontal lobe, which is there to kind of let you plan things a little bit. But this one's going, oh no, there is no time to think. That I am hijacking all functions. And then the hippocampus is very, very closely tied to the amygdala here, if you see it. So the hippocampus is that's where memory happens. So basically, emotions and memories are very like physically tied together, if you can see the brain. And that's why sometimes smelling something or seeing something can drive us into a state of bliss or a state of anguish. But this is how this is really what is driving our emotions. So like I said, hippocampus, memory. So it also is very closely tied to the sense of smell. So the first cranial nerve, the olfactory bulb, that actually is going right by the hippocampus. So smell and memory is very tied together. We also have like instinctive thinking, sexual arousal, some basic, just almost instinctive. I have a toddler, so a lot of what I'll be referring to is what toddlers do. But what I think toddlers are doing, that just basic, I want this now type of behavior. And then just some of, a whole variety of emotions that come from memory. So sometimes we learn to have an emotion in response to a situation because that situation has taught us grief or taught us happiness or taught us calm. And the memory is what's bringing it to us. So usually you can have memory as well as imagination come from the hippocampus. So in spiritual moments, this one's also very, very active. So so your spiritual experience, that sense of, I knew I had a connection. I knew that was incredibly deep and necessary. It's sticking to your memory. And so almost bringing you back to that spiritual home because it's now stuck in your memory. This is where it lives. So regular mindfulness practices, deep breathing, meditation, even chanting, I'll say is a part of this. It can lead to changes in the hippocampus. So basically you remember things better through your spiritual practice, but you also might have more regulation over the emotions that can come up in a moment that can kind of drive you to difficult places. So yeah, big fan of the hippocampus. And I think it can do a lot. Back to the amygdala, fear and stress, like I said, PTSD. So I found it very interesting that they studied this with yoga. So the amygdala actually might become less active overall, which is great. That's what we want, because that will create a feeling of calmness and security. Whereas when it's really high, that's the feeling of panic, terror, insecurity, being on edge, always kind of second guessing yourself. But it's so interesting that something that I think this is the best study I found was yoga's impact on it. So yoga actually increases blood flow to the brain. It has glucose that we all have in us all the time. It's used more efficiently. The brain in general, like the neurons in the brain, become more active. So you'll have that more sense of connection and touch. You have functional connectivity. So it's like the brain is creating the shortest pathway to the best outcome for its activity. Like it makes itself more efficient because sometimes, how it takes us I will say for myself, I don't want to generalize this whole group, but some of us, it takes a while to calm down after sort of a rocking event. We just go, oh my gosh, I cannot think. This is really bad. Oh no, what do I do next? Do I leave the country? I'm embarrassed forever. Where does this go? And it actually, functional connectivity is sometimes, it doesn't make that detour that our brains go into when we go through a difficult situation so much of a detour. It's kind of like going, okay, let's go to A to B. You don't need to, change your passport. Everything's going to be fine. But so it helps. Yoga does help with that. And then I'm going to go more into neurotransmitters later. And that's where I get super jargony. So, everyone just hang on. But it does have an impact. And these are really the messenger systems between the neurons. So all these lobes I've been talking about, they're made up of neurons connected in a specific way, but how they talk to each other is through neurotransmitters and chemicals. And that's how they do the things that I've been talking about here. So I will get into the actual communication system. So as someone I've got I do addiction medicine. And you know what? Even as someone who's a Hare Krishna doing addiction medicine and kind of growing up that way, I love it. I love it. Never had a drink in my life. Absolutely love this field. Some of the most rewarding patients, kindest people, biggest hearts, absolutely adore it. This is such a strongly established field in psychiatry. This is the thing, like it is on every single exam. It is brought up because this is known. There has not been any deviation for this one for decades. But this is a huge nucleus in many ways. It's right here. I'm putting the arrow around it. It's bright blue. It's tiny, but it is responsible for euphoria, for reward, for pleasure. And usually, I know what I've written down here is that engaging in chanting or singing during spiritual practices can activate this, leading to an uplifting and rewarding sensation. Here's the part that I find so interesting. This is the part of this is an entire pathway in the brain. And when people become addicted to substances, this pathway is running the show. So if you develop an addiction to gambling, sex, alcohol, I mean, harder drugs. Again, I'm not sure since this is recorded and on YouTube. I know YouTube has like guidelines, so I'm going to be very careful about harder drugs I mentioned. But this ends up becoming an overwhelming pathway, and it runs every show. So things aren't really going to go to your frontal lobe, but they're going to go through the nucleus accumbens and through dopamine. Does this get me more dopamine? Is this giving me more pleasure? Is this how I get to think? This is running the show. And I found it very interesting. There's been some devotees I've spoken to who are in recovery, and they've mentioned to me, I love chanting. I love meditation because I feel the same way I felt when I was high, but I don't have the low afterwards, and I don't have a withdrawal afterwards. It's just, there's this euphoria, and it's, kind of equal to anything else I went through, but there's no crash. And I think that's such a fascinating euphoria, a fascinating pathway. So there's some people who go, I just can't get through the day without chanting. And when you think about that sometimes from a dopamine nucleus accumbens pathway, you don't really think, oh, you have a problem, but you think, wow, that is really doing some good work for you. I think that must be making you really happy. So yes, love the nucleus accumbens. It is huge. And it's amazing that this same effect from spirituality can come from things that could destroy a life. But this is offering a much safer alternative. And then neural synchronization. Okay, this is jargon. So, all right, so here's what this is. So neurons working together in harmony is neural synchronization. So this is most interesting in you'll see it most in social situations. So if you're, getting really lucky, you've gone somewhere, you meet a bunch of people you gel with, your conversation's going back and forth in a fantastic way. You're really, really feeling like this is amazing. I have found my people. So this shared social environment makes people's neuron activity kind of go in the same direction. You kind of follow the same pathway. But when you have a spiritual moment, that feeling of connection you have with other people can translate to a higher power. So that same feeling of I found my people can happen with, oh, I found my higher power. I have this connection. So some people might actually have to go out and make a ton of friends to feel this, and other people who go, I don't think I can handle that. That is way too many people. They're able to achieve that same sense of connection through their spiritual moments. And I think that's so beautiful. That's something, it kind of makes me think of how in some spiritual practices, there's God is everything and everyone all at once, but is also his own or her own, their own creation. And it just kind of shows that sense of connection that you can have with tons of people, you can have with a great being. And that I find really interesting in the spiritual understanding. So here's my bonus slide. So a lot of people ask me like, well, a lot of what you said doesn't really, it's not there to prove the existence of God. And I go, whoa, we are not heading in that direction with this conversation. This is not what this is about. But here's what's very interesting. A lot of what I just showed you is people connecting to God and what their brains do in response to their connection to God. So imagine if you have zero belief in God. You go, there is no God. What are they talking about? No. So what they did is they did images on an atheist. So that same thing where they look at the orientation area for an atheist. Here, it's very active before meditation and way less active after. So there is a sense of connection, but they don't have it as prominently as someone who believes in God. So what they found is in all of these studies, if you have a sincere devotional belief, there is a brain change. If there's not such a sincere devotional belief, it doesn't show up. And so what's interesting is it's not to say atheists can't experience connectedness and love, and not at all to say that, but it won't be kind of just sitting there and meditating or thinking about the divine. It might be going out, seeing a bunch of friends, doing something fun, taking some deep breaths, going out in nature. It's a lot of extra work that you can't do in winter time, I guess, is my best explanation. So I'm certainly not going outside and putting my bare feet on the ground and feeling connected with the world because it's freezing. But I can get that same sensation if I'm really having a meaningful, deeper spiritual moment kind of under my own roof. So it's interesting. It's not to say that this is an inaccessible sensation, but it's almost a quicker pathway to peace in many ways, just being able to have this experience. So basically, just summing this up, brain scans tell us that engaging in meditation, prayer, and various spiritual practices can actually change the way our brains work. So it's a workout. Spirituality is a workout for the mind. It's shaping it to become more focused, emotionally resilient, and compassionate. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that's why it's such a necessary part for, at least I can speak for my patients that I see, it's been a very necessary part for some people's spiritual journey. And then the other thing I also this is my asterisk to all of this, is that brain regions and processes vary so much from person to person. It's why you'll see a lot of people who've tried mental health meds and go, oh my gosh, that didn't work for me, but that worked for me. It's because we might each have roughly the same brain, but in terms of how each neuron is connected, how each transmitter is being released, how each transmitter is being accepted, it's so different from all of us just in this group. So it is exciting to see that there's a field like this where people actually have almost unanimously soothing experiences from their spiritual life. And I think that's, again, very beautiful. So now I'm moving on to brain chemistry. And this is where, I mean, please unmute and just stop me. Because I do see a lot of comments building up, but I was going to get to it at the end, so I didn't double answer. But let me know.
It's okay. Don't worry about the comments. We like to
Excellent.
write in the chat as things are going on, but don't worry.
Awesome. Perfect. So basically, when you're having those special moments during prayers, meditation, or deep connection, it turns out the brain's messengers, which are also called neurotransmitters, and chemical messengers, which are our hormones, they're doing a big part of this. So like I said, they're the talking between all the sections. So this is kind of like the most sciencey. I had a choice to make here. I had a choice between make this like 400 slides longer and have each picture super big, but the pictures are, again, super jargony, wildly jargony. So what I did was I made them tiny, but at least with the point of being able to run you through what you're looking at. So this was me really trying to, I'm doing my best, I guess. So let me just start with serotonin. I feel like many people have heard about serotonin. It is brought up all the time. There is this one neurotransmitter theory of serotonin that most people think about when they think about psychiatry, that, oh, you just think it's a chemical imbalance and that's what happens. And that is one reason people can have mental health concerns, but there are a lot of neurotransmitters, as you're about to see, and there's a lot of different brain positions. So it's never quite that simple, but it is important. So the simple answer for what serotonin does in the brain is it makes you feel happy and calm. So the more serotonin we have, we usually have feelings of peace and joy. And that's what happens during spiritual experiences. Too much serotonin and too little are bad things, but having just the right amount, which a lot of spiritual experiences can offer, that's great. And then the reason for this tiny, tiny image is I just want, if people can see this, and if you're on a phone, I'm just so sorry, but what it's showing is a bunch of pathways going all throughout the brain. So serotonin has to travel your whole brain, and your whole brain needs it to kind of have that sense of well-being, which is why even a small deficiency in it can be a problem. Dopamine we covered when I talked about the nucleus accumbens earlier, about the feelings of pleasure and reward, how it's tied to addiction, but it makes the spiritual experience so rewarding that you try to get it back. And that's really what that chemical is doing, is trying to make you seek out your beloved, seek out a higher power, seek out a sense of connection again and again, because it can be so euphoric. And dopamine, much like serotonin, all throughout the brain. So some people So some people find that there's more of an issue with their dopamine. Some people might find there's more of an issue with serotonin. What I find awesome about meditation is it just seems to kind of cover all these neurotransmitters at once. Oxytocin, it usually comes up in the context of pregnancy, but it is there even when you're not pregnant. And this one's also called the love hormone. So this creates a sense of social bonding. So we have that sense of connection and unity with other people from it. And I know I also talked about neural synchronization. So that's kind of what oxytocin is doing. It's not all throughout the brain. It's actually mostly here in that hypothalamus area that's trying to calm us all down. But it can help with some pain regulation. It can help with that really, really overworked amygdala that's just there to get us to run. It can even go to the nucleus accumbens that we talked about with the social learning side of things. And then it also helps us with just sensations in general. So that all of this being social, being connected, again, not trying to force anyone to be a social butterfly through meditation, but it's just, there's a difference between being, enjoying solitude and feeling lonely. And this is that little difference, not to say it's just oxytocin, but it's part of that whole chemical reaction. Next is endorphins, which most people who are gym rats or know gym rats or read a lot of articles about just physical exercise probably hear this 1,000 times in a day, but they are natural painkillers and mood elevators. They are, and they're released during intense spiritual experiences. So they also create a sense of euphoria. So I'm just talking about the runner's high, except instead of having to run, and I'm saying this as someone who doesn't run, but I understand that some people have a runner's high. You can also get this by sitting still, I guess is the best way to explain it. But it's there to make you feel happy, enhance pleasure, boost your self-esteem, support weight loss. So it is like what the women's magazines are right. It's not a bad thing to have. It's just there's other ways besides the runner's high. Next is cortisol. That word comes up a lot for people going through stress. So this is the stress hormone. It is just super high usually. Sometimes it can lead to like difficulty handling your blood sugar. It can lead to weight gain. It is not an easy one. It is so this is really it kind of makes everything act in a little bit of a berserk way, just enough for you to go, oh my gosh, I'm stressed out. I need to calm down. So spiritual practices actually do lower cortisol levels. And so that sensation, even if your stress is actually not lesser, you feel it less. And I think that's what we're all really going for, is just, I know I can't get rid of the world and the way it's doing things. Let me just not let it run me over. And so that's what cortisol can do. And then you've got melatonin. So a lot of people might see this at the pharmacy. It is naturally occurring. It regulates sleep-wake cycles. So what happens is as the sun sets, our body is naturally releasing melatonin. It is just naturally, and it gradually increases until there's no more light outside. And in I guess like almost a fantasy world I'm describing, but maybe humanity before electronics, we have enough melatonin that we naturally feel sleepy and go to sleep. Now we have to buy it at Target because there is so much light all the time and most of us can't sleep, but it does create a sense of tranquility and just kind of helps us during these quiet reflective practices. It's the same thing that kind of makes us sleepy. I'm one of those people that falls asleep during meditation, and this is 100% the reason why. So so that's one that I think is pretty good and bad, I guess, depending on where you're meditating. Next is adrenaline, and this is a fight or flight hormone. And this is being released during stress as well. So this and cortisol are just walking through your brain hand in hand, making you feel extra jumpy, making you super aware of everything going on in the world. And it can go too far. What's interesting about spiritual practice is that it controls the release of it. So it's not making it that you've got a ton of it, so you're super aware of the world, but you get a sense of focus and almost this like excitement in your spiritual moments that is actually just adrenaline coming through you, but without it trying to wreck you on the way, because that can do that. And really from this image, what I wanted to show is what happens is there's a really strong link when it comes to adrenaline between the hippocampus and amygdala. And it's a really weak link to the prefrontal cortex. So what's happened is you're getting that memory, you're getting some reason to be scared, And then it immediately tells your amygdala, it tells on you to your amygdala that goes, oh my gosh, adrenaline, oh my gosh. And so it can come. And then your frontal lobe, your prefrontal cortex, which is working on thinking, logic, what to do, and evaluating. This is the frontal lobe, basically. It's pretty much trying to, it's especially in a spiritual moment, it's going, hey, everybody calm down. I know it's going to take a while for this message to get to you because I'm not as close to the hippocampus as the amygdala is, but let's get there. And eventually that front part of your brain, with enough practice, and they'd say this in therapy all the time, it can actually overpower that hippocampus amygdala strong emotion reaction. And so meditation, spiritual practice, huge role in that, huge role in emotional regulation. This one, GABA, this is what's interesting to me. This is going up during spiritual practices. So you have more GABA levels, you have a calm and peaceful state of mind. And so what it does is it's an inhibitor in the brain. So it stops a lot of brain activity from going too wild, too far. Here's the other thing. So you know how I mentioned addiction and the nucleus accumbens? With GABA, it is actually usually released with alcohol or even a benzodiazepine or like which is Xanax or something like that. So that's what that's why people will say, I drink and I calm down and I kind of feel a buzz and I feel relaxed. It's GABA. GABA's doing that to you. And that's something that, again, there is a spiritual equivalent to it. So if you have a spiritual connection, you have a spiritual practice, and you find that it makes you feel calm and peaceful and you don't fall asleep, but it's usually GABA that's helping you with that. So it's a very, very important one to know. And it can, sometimes, again, like when it comes from more of a medication standpoint, there's a risk of addiction. Whereas if it's coming from a spiritual standpoint, it's you get all the high, but none of the after effects and none of the damage. So again, really important. This is what I encourage for my patients to do more than anything else, because I'm not a big fan of the benzos. So yeah, this has brought us to the group activity. And if any, I kind of wanted to know what to do at this group activity junction.
Yes, no worries. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Suni. Oh, great. And you put it on a slide. So excellent. Yes. So for everybody, we are going to be going into breakout groups shortly. So please, if you aren't a part of our WhatsApp groups, you could take a screenshot of this. However, we're also going to be sharing it in our WhatsApp groups so that you'll be able to, there'll be somebody in there who will have this so that you'll be able to review it while you're there. So we're going to be pausing our recording here and we'll be coming back after the breakout group started. Okay, everyone. So it's our question and answers and reflection time for Urban Devi. So please either raise your virtual hand or unmute yourself if there's something that you would like to share from the reflections, or if you have a question for Dr. Suni. Yes, Ishvari Sundari, please go ahead.
Yes, hi. First a reflection and then a question. So, I was talking in the group, I incorporated my chanting with a pranayama technique that my Guru Maharaj taught me, and that's like the first part of the mantra, to do a deep inhale, like that 4-part, 5-part inhale, and then on the second part you exhale. And I forget to do it, but when we had this exercise, of course, I was like, okay, let me do that, because it actually does help. It's not only are you getting the nectar of the chanting, but you're also getting, a breath exercise, which helps you to regulate your, parasympathetic, sympathetic system, your nervous system, but it also helps you to focus even more on the mantra, because you're inhaling, it takes a little longer, and it's like you really focus on what you're doing. So the meditation is definitely, something that I do, and then I stopped doing it for whatever reason, but I'm glad that the exercise, gave me that push to kind of like just sit down and do it. And it just reminded me how beneficial it is, and, to get back into it, incorporate that back into my life. And not chanting, but the meditation, I mean, part of yoga. The chanting is there, but mixing them up or doing them separate, how critical it is. Just changes your whole aura and brings peace. Question for I'm sorry, the name again? I'm like drawing a blank.
Suni.
Okay, Suni. Suni, thank you. I'm on my phone and everything is so tiny. I don't even see myself. I'm just a blurb. Um, Question for you on this. So my mother, at the age, already at my age, in her 50s, she had frontal temporal dementia. We were shocked because, like, nobody in my family has had dementia, Alzheimer's, or any memory loss, except my grandmother at 60 days before her 100th birthday is when she died. She maybe had a little bit at the end, but
Wow.
even her own daughter, though, died at 74, my mom. So I was just wondering, like, I haven't done enough research into this. Alzheimer's. There's a lot on it, but dementias could be really tricky. So one of the studies that the doctor said was, it could be an onset of adult diabetes affecting now the frontal temporal cortex. And there's all this study going out there. Fortunately, my mom died. They didn't do any more research on her or stuff like that. But I'm just wondering if meditation could help to prevent the frontal temporal, lobes from shrinking and causing memory loss. I know that it does a lot, but I'm just
Yeah.
focusing on the frontal temporal, which is,
Sure.
that rapid brain shrinking.
Right. Frontotemporal dementia is genetically based. And fortunately, it's not like something like Huntington's disease, which is dominant and then each generation definitely gets it. It's sort of, what you're asking, the answer is yes, but also no. So what it could do is improve a lot of that planning, executive function, logic, reasoning. Temporal regions are also strongly tied to emotion. So they do find there's like a whole lifestyle, I think, and maybe it's probably just the news I see because I'm a psychiatrist, so only certain things come my way. But there's been a lot of discussion lately on lifestyles that are beneficial for reducing the risk of dementia, because there's some kinds of dementias that are reversible, like one's caused from high blood pressure, diabetes, certain things. And then there's another that's very genetically based and it's going to keep going no matter what. But what we do is sometimes we're just trying to function and we're just trying to improve our quality of life. So meditation has been put in there as one of those lifestyle factors that does help you even as brain matter lessens, which is essentially what dementias are. They're just less and less brain matter causing more and more loss of functioning in many ways, not just memory. And like one of the earlier slides showed, there's something called the functional connectivity. It's kind of having the shortest pathway for things to work. So you might even have this opportunity where by meditating, you get some functioning back with some remaining neurons compared. So you make the most of what you have. So I would say that's hopefully that's an answer to your question, but that is,
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in it for a lot of different conditions.
Thank
Great.
you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ishvari Sundari, for that question, and
Thank
Dr.
you.
Suni for answering that. So we also have Shamala Priya with her hand up. Please go ahead.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hi, Suni. Thank you so much for doing this amazing class and presentation. I'm learning so much. I'm loving it.
Thanks.
So I'd like to hear a little bit more about the anterior lobe. It makes me think of a particular client, and, when this comes up, this kind of like compulsive behavior, or when a person almost has like a pathological view of themselves and they're always, do they think I'm weird? Do they think I'm not smart enough? It's like a constant kind of thing. And I'm thinking of a doctor who did some neuropsych testing, and their comment was that this person did not receive enough validation and affirmation as a child, like, you're doing great, it's okay, good job, it's okay, you made a mistake, let's try again. Really highly intelligent people, but they're in that, what seems like, what I heard from you was that this anterior lobe loop, like it's an overactivation. So what helps to calm that down?
So
I'm that part.
I would say there is, especially if it's like obsessive compulsive, because the anterior cingulate cortex is kind of more associated with just error correction and having to fix things and making everything perfect. So there's actually a couple different ways people deal with it. So again, I know this whole talk was basically about meditation, so I feel like that's the default answer I could give you, is just teaching them to enhance other neurotransmitters and seeing if that can make the frontal lobe more active, and that can be used to calm down the more maladaptive parts of the brain. But there's also another there's another thing some people do. It's called it's kind of what you do for pure OCD, is exposure response prevention. So it's something that people they expose themselves a little bit to the thing that frightens them. So rather than kind of living in denial and acting like, oh, everything's fine if I just kind of go to La La Land or I say this. So sometimes it's about you're having that negative thought, and then instead of trying to hide it, suppressing it, going away from it, you lean into it and go, what's this about? What am I doing? Oh my gosh, I want to cry right now. I want to panic. I want to shake. I hate this. But venturing further in and saying, where did this come from? Why am I saying this to myself? What's causing it? A lot of that has a big role in being able to then lessen the anterior cingulate cortex's response, because it's almost like if you keep tapping your hand over and over again, initially you go, this is annoying. I hate this feeling. And then eventually your nerves start dying down a little bit and they go, all right, whatever, it's just tapping. I guess that's what's happening. Nothing else is happening. And our brain does that with our emotions as well. It goes, oh, what's this horrible feeling? And then you're around it enough for it to go, okay, fine. I don't need to be this strong about it. So yeah, there's a lot you can do.
So yeah, so almost like not suppressing actually there,
Lean
but
in.
also connecting to the meditation or to spirituality. It's again like a self-acceptance. Like that's our connection with Krishna, is this like level of acceptance that we feel when we're connecting. So
Yeah.
that will be beneficial, like accept.
What you said is so crucial. Acceptance, is it? Because I think sometimes we all feel we have to be perfect beings because we're in worship of or loving a perfect being. But it's actually, the perfection lies in accepting ourselves as we are and just, kind of loving our journey. So that sometimes some devotee patients I have, that's sort of the bigger discussion we get into, is like, okay, these negative emotions exist. Okay, I'm not reacting the best to stuff, but this is who I am. And maybe I'll look into this and I can learn to love this imperfection in myself. And I know that Krishna loves this imperfection in myself. And sometimes people can just live with that so deeply that it helps a lot with these things that, I might point out and go, yeah, that sounds like the anterior cingulate cortex, but it's deeper than that.
Great. Thank you so much, Shamapriya, for that. And so we actually had a question in the chat, and I just want to kind of squeeze it in before we continue with the hands up. I'm so excited to see so many hands up. Everyone's so excited to talk to you. So Sharmila was asking, is there a minimum time duration for meditation practice to trigger those positive effects?
So I wish there was like an easy answer. It's really until you feel a positive effect. That's the answer. So there's some, and to be honest with you, I'm so terrible at meditation. Like, I know I'm doing this talk, and it's the reason I studied meditation is because I'm awful at it. And I can't tell you how long I've been at this. And I don't feel much, sometimes I'm just like, oh my gosh, I think like I'm anxious, but I'm also kind of sleepy is usually how I end up with meditation. And there's some people I know who go, oh my gosh, I took to breath work like a fish to water. I'm amazing at this. And that's what some people do, is they just find like this was 1 or 2 tries. Some people go, this is ongoing. I think it's just knowing that eventually, because we all have such vastly different brains, something makes sense to us in a way that works for us. So that's probably my.
Well, thank you for willing to work on the ones that even there isn't an easy answer. So we appreciate it. So next we have Parijita Devi Dasi, please.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. So, yeah, my question was that, we, or at least I, just struggle with self-regulation on and off. And is there anything one can do, to help and sustain self-regulation?
So what self-regulation mean to you?
Just being consistent. I think I would say in relation to I think what I would say, not in terms of like habits, but more in terms of emotions, being more self-reliant, regulating your emotions, your responses.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was saying in relation to emotions, what could one do? Is there anything like, I mean, I would say that maybe a good sleep,
Yeah.
something like breath work, or something meditation. These things would probably help to bring some kind of regulation. So what would you suggest? Would you suggest anything that one could do which can help to experience a consistent self-regulation in relation to emotions?
That's a really good point. It is when you brought up sleep especially. So one thing about emotional self-regulation is it should be a part of our grooming technique. So it's not that you might wake up and have a wonderful day and everything's going very, very well, and you don't have to think about emotions because they're the emotions we like. But you might also wake up and have a terrible day. And it's really one of the things that I usually work with my patients is, listen, I know you're not having a panic attack all day, every day, but do you practice regulating your breathing? Do you make sure you sleep well, eat well? And this is a lot to say in today's economy and society. I know it's like easier to said than done, but are you at least giving yourself some basic care? Are you maintaining your own material self? Because then that helps our emotional self, which then lets us have a more enhanced spiritual self. And so eating as best we can, sleeping as best we can, and then forgiving ourselves for not being perfect at that. And then even practicing deep breathing and meditation that you know you enjoy, even when you're not feeling the need for it. So it almost becomes a reflex. It can become a habit. So it comes to you more quickly in a time of distress. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Also, I think there's a lot of talk about gut health affecting
Yeah.
mental health. So how true is that?
That one's
Um,
very true. That one, absolutely. Those neurotransmitters I was talking about, the serotonin in the brain, there's also serotonin receptors in the gut. So there's actually a lot of people who aren't very aware of their own mental health and their own mental state. Their gut tells them before their mind does. So people might have stomach problems, and it turns out it's from a deep emotional place. And so just I think they have found that diet, exercise, even just treating the gut problem, some people find that there's a major change in their mental state from that. So that stuff's definitely true.
Well, thank you so much, Parajita, and thank you,
thanks.
Dr. Suni. I think we're going to have to find someone to do a talk on gut health and Krishna somehow to put it all together. And then we have my dear co-host, Surabhi Govinda Devidasi is next.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Yes, and thank you so much for the wonderful talk, Suni. It was really inspiring in many ways for me. One thing I wanted to just go into a little bit is, the meditation is such a broad term, and it can mean a lot of things to different people in many ways. And often in the world we live in, it really means about the mind and body connection, which is where we're going, breath, releases, good hormones. For me, I started practicing Patanjali's yoga a long time ago, and then I went on to do TCM, and then I did all kinds of things. And I found out that my practice today with Bhakti Yoga is really about meditating. It's meditating with those things, but also there's a point where I have to sort of let go. It's not about just acceptance, but it's about letting go. It's like one step further.
Mm-hmm.
Once I accept the situation, what do I do, right? You can feel sad about it, so you can't just stop there. You kind of have to find the place. And for me, it's like my solution is always to do the chanting, because I'm sort of embedded in that with my beads, my japa, and there's a sound involved.
Yes.
So it really stops it. So for me, chanting with sound is really an important aspect, not just sitting quietly so I don't fall asleep for a start, right? Because my mouth is engaged. And so that always helps. And then there's a point when I'm chanting, I actually start talking to the divine because I say, I'm in this horrible place, come and help me, right? It's really that simple in some ways, because I mean, the example I described, my son had a very traumatic car accident, and then we went through quite a lot of, it was like the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my life, raising 3 children. But then this last week we had a storm, and he ended up having a similar sort of incident with somebody else fracking, and he was very, it threw him back in his trauma. It threw me back in that trauma.
Oh,
And
yeah.
what I could do was really just meditate. And then I just said, Krishna, this is your problem too. You put me here. You need to help me. And then I start to realize that, I'm not a controller. And then that letting go of realizing that I need to have help and also reality of the situation that these things happen, sort of starts to set in. So that's what I call acceptance, is all of that. And so I was really finding that sound is kind of a key component. And I know that there's a lot of research in neuroscience about sound on the effect of brain. And maybe you can expand on that a little bit. And also, I know that in Anne Lembeck's book on the dopamine nation that we were talking about, she absolutely says in there that 50% of the solution to many mental health is believing in the divine. And she doesn't, and this was somebody I heard talk 2 weeks ago at Stanford.
Yeah.
So she absolutely said that. I haven't had a chance to really explore her book to dive into that part, but she's noted that as a neuroscientist professor at Stanford, that there is this need to let go to divinity. So, so I had those 2 ideas about the sound being powerful and also linking to a divine in a much more meaningful way, in a personal way. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That is, I really do need to read that book based on what you said.
What's the name of the book again?
Dopamine Nation. I'll send it to you.
Or Surabhi Govinda, could you share it in the chat for everybody else? So
Sure.
that we can all have it. Thank you so much. Wow, Surabhi Govinda just dropping bombs
Yeah.
over here.
No, it's
Blowing our
true.
minds.
And also just kind of from a research standpoint, so religion has found to be or just spirituality, having a belief, and I don't want to just say religion because there's just so many different ways to say this, but it has been proven to be a protective measure in many different mental health conditions. Just having that belief has had a lot of powerful impact. And I'm one of my my mentor for spirituality and psychiatry, he often told me we don't talk about this enough either. So, most doctors, they're more comfortable asking a patient about their sex lives rather than their religious beliefs. And he said I thought that was a really important point, because he goes, we're more embarrassed about that for some reason, even though that it holds a lot of answers for people. Also, I think to answer the question about sound, this is kind of why there are those grounding techniques. And so many times those grounding techniques go, in this room, I see 5 things that I can hear, 4 things I can see, 3 things I can smell, 2 things I can touch, 1 thing I can taste. It just sort of grounding yourself to the world around you. It has a very powerful effect. This is just in a non-spiritual sense, but it is a huge, huge impact for many people.
Right.
So
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then, so we have time for one more question before it'll be time for Rukmini Walker, our dear Rukmini Walker, to share. So Sharmila, you have your hand up. Sharmila and Veda, did you guys want to ask a question or share?
Hare Krishna. Yeah, thank you so much for this talk. I just had a question. You mentioned that there was meditation could help with PTSD. I was just wondering, does it help? I know PTSD can trigger anxiety and depression. I know meditation could help with that, but does it help with the actual memories, or does it help with the trauma, how the trauma is stored in our brain? I was just wondering if you could expand on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Nice to see you again. But basically, what meditation does is you've got the amygdala and the anterior cingulate cortex we talked about, and they're in trauma, they are firing. I mean, they're very, very, very powerful. And so the act of meditation, because of all that work it does on the frontal lobe, so the frontal lobe is there to tell you, hey, calm down, let's reason through this, let's think this through. What are you talking about? That becomes more and more powerful. So it has an opportunity to suppress the intensity of the signals. And there's 2 ways I've seen my patients react to this. So some of them will go, gosh, I'm not even getting that flashback anymore. That's not happening. And others will say, actually, I have those thoughts. Those memories are there. They're always a part of my life, but I don't feel as knocked out by them. And so there's kind of different ways people respond, but it's just about getting that sense of control back.
Thank you so much. That makes a lot of sense. And thank you so much, Damodar Priya. Hare Krishna.
You're welcome. It's lovely to see the kind of younger generation participating in Urban Devi. Would love to see that more. So we actually you did such a great job answering that, Suni, that we have a little bit more time. So Shalini, you have your hand up. Is there something that you think you could fit in like 3 minutes?
Hare Krishna Mataji, can I ask a last question?
Yes, please go ahead.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. This was very wonderful session, Mataji. So my question is, I have clinical anxiety since 2000.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Mataji. Your sound is muffled. I couldn't hear.
I'm having trouble hearing her as well.
Okay. I'm saying I have this anxiety issue. I have clinical anxiety issue.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm taking medicines, and obviously my doctor is not in a spiritual community, so he keep giving me medicines for that. And I am also doing this spiritual practice since last 4-5 years. But I don't know, matlab, where it going to end up with medicines.
Oh,
because it is a very real time problem for me. How matlab, why didn't it stop my matlab, my meditation practice? Why it not stop my medicines? Maybe it is lacking of my sincerity.
Nope, that doesn't mean that. There's many different elements. So you could be a very sincere devotee and have very sincere practice, but I always try to remind people, like, our bodies are part of the material world. Like, this is a vessel, right? This is a impermanent, temporary, and like I said earlier, imperfect. That's what it is. So many times mental health treatment isn't just medication. And it's definitely not just therapy. It's also, and it's even, I know this is a very spiritual group, but it's not just spirituality. It's also the other parts of our lifestyle we talked about. It's also that good diet, that good sleep, that good exercise. There's so many different puzzle pieces, and we're all differently shaped puzzles. So you must be an amazing devotee. You must have extreme sincerity, but it could be the material brain itself. It just needs some help of medicine to help you become more spiritual. And everyone's medicine journey is different, and they talk about it with their own doctor. But some people take medicine until they're out of the clinical anxiety or out of the clinical depression, and then they're able to come off the medicine. Some people need it for the rest of their life. Everyone's journey is different, but you've done everything. You're doing everything correctly.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mataji.
Shalini, thank you. That's for sharing your vulnerability and kind of letting us all support you in that. So unfortunately, dear Vaishnavis, our time is almost up. So before I kind of shift it over to our dear Rukmini Walker, who's going to be finishing up our time together, I just want to remind everyone that in the chat, you can take a look. We have our WhatsApp groups for Urban Devi. So if you want to continue these conversations, or maybe even if Dr. Suni wants to share her contact information for anybody that wants to follow up with her further, we're going to be sharing it in WhatsApp. So please join our group so that you can do that. And so please go ahead and do that. And now we have our dear Rukmini Walker, who's going to be sharing more about next month's Urban Devi.
Yeah, thank you so much. Suni, this was really great. I mean, just such a holistic look at our, mental, emotional, spiritual needs as a whole person and on a spiritual path. I appreciated it so much. I think everyone did. So thank you so much. It was beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back. I wanted to remind everyone we still have a few spaces left in our women's self-care retreat, which is in April 14th to the 21st, which will be in Cali, Colombia, a beautiful, beautiful place. So please join us if you can, April 14th to 21st. And then next month, we have a really wonderful speaker. You may know her. She's an internet influencer, Rukmini Podar. So on March 31st, she'll be speaking about becoming an essence seeker and how creativity can bring us closer to the divine. So she's a super creative artist, And she says, by nature, we're all inherently creative, conscious beings. Our creativity offers us a bridge, not only to express our emotions, but also to understand and dive into our inner world. So she says, in this session, we will cultivate our own creativity in order to better connect to our emotions and ultimately to our divine source. This session will be informative and experiential. We will practice drawing our feelings. So Suni, you might like to come because you're an artist. Drawing our feelings together. Come prepared with some paper and basic art supplies and see how engaging in your creativity can teach you more about your inner world and your relationship with Krishna. So please join us March 31st, same time. And thank you all for being here. Wonderful. Hare Krishna.